is the Pegasus Podcast, presented by Night Sports Now. UCF news, views, and a few hot takes. Now, here are your hosts, Bailey Go Knights Adams and Christian Charge On Simmons.
Welcome into episode 163. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at @ByCASimmons, and at Night Sports Now. We're back. It feels like we did this. I guess we're doing this a day later than we normally do. It's Tuesday. I had Monday Night Football duties last night with the Bucks. But it just feels weird because the last time we did this podcast, you and I were in person. We were live at Nights Out Pub, and it's just a very different setting to be back here on Zoom.
I also just woke up from a nap. And
oh, good.
We had to postpone starting it a little bit because our listeners will understand because they're human beings. It's one of those naps where you didn't mean to take a nap where you were going to get into a really deep sleep and then you do, and then you wake up and it takes you a minute to realize what dimension you're in. And it's just, I'm going through that currently.
What did you say to me? You said, I'm realizing what it means to be awake or something like that.
Yeah, I said, because you texted me and were like, I'm ready to hop on whenever. And I was like, I'm rediscovering what it means to be awake right now. So I'm going to need a second, but I got some coffee. So we're good. Yeah. You did a good job on your, whatever the hell it was, your Bucks thing last night. What was it?
Thanks. Appreciate it.
What was it called? I don't know what to call that.
Pewter Game Day Show.
Yeah, Bailey basically called the Bucks game last night for the folks who wanted to watch it on YouTube, and I watched some of it, not all of it, because I'm not that committed to this friendship, but I thought that you did a really nice job. Yeah.
I'm not that committed to my own. I didn't watch myself at all, so I'm not even committed to myself. But thank you to everyone for listening to the post-game podcast. Anyone who was out at Nights Out Pub that was listening there. It was a lot of fun to do that. Wish would have been a better result, but also want to thank everyone who has dropped some 5-star reviews, whether on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever it is. We have a 5-star review question to get things started before we jump into things we missed from K-State and then the Baylor preview. But I was actually going to read the full, maybe not the full question or the full thing, but it was a nice note, and I wanted to shout out. So on YouTube, this is Chuckles the Clown 1884. Says, hey guys, I left a 5-star review on Spotify and I'm a huge fan. Been watching since you guys were joking about Shreveport and since the beginning during the crazy turnover between staffs. Because yes, we started the podcast and then everything for UCF just completely imploded. But maybe for the better at this point. And this is also for Bailey, come on you Spurs, which I think I really do appreciate. My question is, do you guys see any scenario that UCF would make it into the Big Ten or SEC when it eventually becomes a Power 2? I'll let you take the bulk of this because realignment is your thing. My short answer is I can't see it, but I also think there's certainly a time where we couldn't see any of this in college football. So I don't know. Probably not.
Let me just say to Chuckles the Clown that I am also a Tottenham enjoyer, so I was a little offended that I did not also get a Coys, but it's fine. I went to, for those watching the video podcast, I opened my mouth to speak and then also tried to take a cup of coffee take a sip of coffee at the same time. I'm sorry. This was such a mistake.
Tried to take a cup of coffie.
Is that what I said? I tried to sip a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Oh man, listen, everything's messed up. We usually do it on Monday nights. It's a Tuesday. I wasn't prepared. We'll get through it. What was the question? Oh, right. SEC Lord. Or the Big Ten. Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay. I got this. So no, I don't think so. And it's tough because never say never because you never know what happens. But you have to look at the way that, and this is why it's hard to predict, is you have to look at the way that realignment has changed over the years. And really as recently as 10 years ago, the qualifications to get into a major conference were so different from what they are now. And by all accounts, UCF is in a major conference. We're moving towards Power 4 as a term. I've been reading a lot of articles by Famol and Dellinger. That's the term that's being used. So I'm like, sweet, we'll just stick with Power 4. But obviously the Big Ten and SEC are not only a level above the ACC and Big 12, but I think there's an expectation both from fans and media and everyone else involved that gap will only grow in the coming years just because of the sheer amount of money they have coming in and the brands they're adding. But the thing about realignment is, let's go back to the magical times of 2009 to 2012. That realignment wave was the Big Ten's big additions were Rutgers and Maryland. They added Nebraska too, and Nebraska was a much larger brand back then, but Rutgers and Maryland were their two big ads. The SEC went and got Mizzou and Texas A&M, which Texas A&M probably still makes sense to say today. Missouri's and it's because back then it was your market far and away determined your value. The Big Ten and the SEC both had networks, the SEC network and the Big Ten network, and the value of those networks and the money they could get from it dramatically increased by the number of cable households in their footprints. So that was what drove those decisions. That's why Rutgers, who was terrible, was technically captures the New York market, so got added. So if the world still worked like that, I would say, sure, I could see a reality where not the SEC, since they already have Florida, but maybe the Big Ten down the road is like, we want to get the Big Ten network into Florida. This past wave has been totally different. And because cable's dying, all that matters now is creating television matchups that people want to watch. That's why the Big Ten went and got USC and UCLA. It's why the SEC went and got Texas and Oklahoma. It's why the Big Ten then went again and got Oregon and Washington. Is the idea is now just you want to create as many big primetime matchups as possible. And UCF just doesn't move the needle on that. The TV ratings so far into the season have more than proved that. I know Fox Sports 1 is a tough channel to get ratings on anyway, but UCF's ratings have been pretty terrible. And the only way they could get, I'm giving like a way longer answer to this than I was expecting, but we'll just keep going. The only way that UCF could reasonably get into one of those conferences when it all blows up again, which it's looking like that'll be in probably 6 or 7 years, is if they've just become this massive must-have brand by then. And that would involve winning national championships, being must-see TV. And that takes decades. That does not happen in 6 or 7 years. It took FSU 30 years. I'd give the only team that's done it in modern history is Clemson. And it took 2 national titles, and they already are not a team that the SEC or Big Ten are currently interested in. So it's a high ceiling. And there's another piece of this that I want to touch on, is that TV isn't doing so hot right now, money-wise, and as long as conferences have been signing their own TV deals, which started in the 80s, every single time their deals have expired, the money's gone up. When all these deals expire in 6 or 7 years, for the first time ever, money might go down. Disney's currently working on offloading ABC. There's talk that they're going to spin off ESPN as well. ESPN's probably going to lose, like, just be a shell of what they are right now in 6 or 7 years because of how much money they're losing. I think there's a good shot that when these deals come up in the early 2030s, for the first time ever, there isn't going to be more money there than there was last time. So I don't think you might not see the SEC or Big Ten add anyone. They might say, whoa, we definitely are not going to split this pie more ways. You actually might even see it go the other way, where they say, do we really need Indiana and Purdue and Kentucky and South Carolina in these leagues, or can we just split the pie fewer ways? And that's how we'll keep our checks rising. So like, that was a really long-winded way to say, no, I don't really see a path to it happening. I guess I could have just said no and we could have moved on.
Yeah. ESPN it could be a shell of itself now. I mean, I think it already is a shell of what it used to be, at least content-wise, but that's an entirely different discussion.
Game day's pretty not great these days, and that makes me sad because I really love game day.
Yeah. That's the thing, is I haven't seen it a ton. I think we talked about this in one of our past podcasts. Maybe I just talked about it when I saw you last, but I haven't felt like I've missed it. Like I really lately have just been wanting to tune in for the picks.
Yeah.
So I've had other stuff going on, other things going on. So I just let me get the picks, let me see the headgear, and that's it. But
I mean, I'm going through that because this Saturday will be the first time that I'm not this season watching any of it, just because we have plans before the game. We're getting lunch. And I've realized I just don't really care. Like, I'm not,
Yeah, it's kind of sad.
Speaking of that, I'm gonna air a problem I have with you to the listeners. So Bailey and I and our friend Sarah and Bailey's girlfriend were all getting lunch on Saturday before the Baylor game. I'm going to ask the listeners what they think of this. I would like to go to Olive Garden. I think that's a reasonable request. We have not gone to Olive Garden as a group. Well, obviously not with your girlfriend ever, because I've only known her for a few months, but like with either of you for like a very, very long time now. I think that's a perfectly normal thing to say, hey, let's go to Olive Garden. You're refusing. You're the one who's saying, no, we cannot go to Olive Garden.
It's not me. I think it's everyone. You're the only one that wants to go.
It's just
No,
you.
it's not.
Yes, it is. Okay, it might also be.
Isn't.
No, it's just you.
Sarah,
why not though?
No, it's everyone, because no one wants to go there.
Why?
I definitely don't want to. That's not something. I don't want to eat something super. Why are we getting into this on the podcast?
Because I'm really annoyed about it. It's like we never go. Like, why can we never go to Olive Garden?
Because I think we've actually been into this. We've gotten into this on the podcast in the past, which I don't know why we did that either. It was because of that 5-star review question, which is, it does not affect me well. I have had, I don't say food poisoning. It's not Olive Garden's fault. It's my stomach's fault. But I'm not trying to set myself up for that before.
You cannot tell me with a straight face that if you got unlimited soup, salad, and breadsticks, that your body would not be able to handle a bowl of soup and some bread.
It happened once.
Tell me that with a straight face.
It happened once.
I don't believe you.
So the last 3 times I've been, I don't know.
The last time I went with you, you got like chicken Alfredo. I'm just saying. I just so the listeners know, I'm being robbed of a good time. Because you can
go to Olive Garden whenever you want.
I can't, because no one wants to go. I haven't been in like 2 months.
What does that tell you?
It tells me that all my friends suck. What did I say to you when you said no earlier text? I was like, I'm sick of everyone in my life.
You said I don't like anyone currently in my life or something like that.
Yeah, that's accurate.
The podcast. Some things that we missed from Kansas State, and it's something we definitely talked about during the game on Saturday and then just completely didn't reference it, I don't think, at all on the post-game show, which was really just that UCF speed very clearly had translates to this level. And I don't know if there was really, I don't know if I was questioning whether it would or not, but it was like very early in the game where I think it might have been one of Johnny's first plays. And it was like, okay, yeah, like UCF's going to have some speed advantages on some of these teams.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of funny because it feels like, I don't know, maybe I'm off base with this, but it feels like college football as a whole, like there aren't as many like unique styles as there used to be. Like it feels like everyone kind of does a variation of the same thing now. There's obviously exceptions, but it's not like, I feel like when I was younger and obviously like before our time, there were very distinct styles that different college football teams would play, even by conference. And that felt like a style matchup on Saturday. Like Kansas State won the game and, you know, they've won it fair and square and they were very physical and that impacted UCF, but they also they didn't have anyone who was close to as fast as basically every single skill player that UCF put out there. I mean, and you could just see how the speed was affecting Kansas State. And if UCF was going to win the game, it was going to be on that, from Johnny to RJ to the receivers. So I rewatched the game, which was more painful than it has been the last few times doing it for the podcast. The flea flicker to Kobe, how quickly he gets down the field on that play is insane.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's like a lightning bolt and he's just there. And that's part of the reason it worked so well. And that speed is going to catch teams off guard in the Big 12 because a lot of them are built for size, which is what UCF's trying to do. And the bright side is that so much Florida talent is fast that they're going to be able to marry those identities in these coming years. They'll be able to get bigger and maintain that speed, but that speed is going to catch teams off guard. And that was just another thing from a very frustrating loss that still was encouraging as hell for the rest of the season.
Yeah, because it was one of those things where it's like it didn't get the job done on Saturday. I mean, we talked about it on post game that there were opportunities for UCF to maybe take a hold of that game and actually win it, which was not necessarily something I was expecting going in. And I wasn't, calling that they were going to win, but it didn't get the job done in that game. But you can go into even this week and be like, yeah, I think that it can this week. And it's going to help them win games in the Big 12. Just, the same way it does. It's that Florida speed is just different. I know I think these days, like a lot of teams have Florida players, but and players from other states that are fast, but Florida is a little bit different. I think that's something that UCF can really lean on, especially as they're kind of getting themselves up for the physical side of it. They can still at least rely on the fact that they have a ton of speed.
Which I feel like I should point out too, that like Kansas State is known for their physicality. Like that's one of the most physical teams, maybe the most physical team in the Big 12. So it's not like UCF's going to have to deal with that level of physicality every week.
It's probably the most physical team they'll see this year, isn't it?
I think so. No one else on their schedule really plays that way. I mean, that's Kansas State's big claim to fame and that's how they're so, and that's funny because it kind of reminds me of UCF a little bit, not style wise, but just recruiting wise. Is Kansas State does not recruit anywhere near the top of the Big 12, but they go get, really physical players who work for what they want to do. And they not even necessarily huge players, like size wise. It's not like they're just massive, because massive guys usually are going to Oklahoma or wherever. It's just guys that want to play physical and are tough as hell and love that contact. And not everyone is built that way. And it's how Kansas State has gone from, team that recruits nothing but 3 stars to literal Big 12 champions.
Yeah. Gritty Midwestern dudes is what it really is.
Yeah, pretty much.
And part of that physicality and something that UCF couldn't necessarily hang with on Saturday was at the linebacker position. UCF's linebackers, not the best performance. I don't think anyone beyond the front 4 really had that great of a day. And I think a lot of that was, just poor tackling. And a lot of it was being unable to cover that big physical. Was it Ben Sinnott, the tight end, looks like a fullback. And I just, early on in the season, I was kind of like, the linebackers are kind of just there. Now I'm full on worried about the linebackers, and it's less Jason Johnson and more so Walter Yates.
I avoided this on the post-game pod just because you were in a public place, which was a ton of fun, but I didn't feel like I was going to go up there in front of a bar and be like, so Walter Yates needs to go, huh? Like, but Walter Yates needs to go, huh? Like, we pegged him in the right at the start of the season when the depth chart came out and he was starting. I think we even said on the podcast, we were like, that's worrying that Ryan Davis or someone else didn't step up there, because Yates felt more like a guy who provides quality depth than someone that you want out there on a Power 5 schedule. He's just a liability, and clearly the whole room is, because if he's out there, it means there's no one behind him who can really handle that, which is disappointing. They just missed on their transfers, and that's where we're at. I mean, we're at the point we were talking about when we were watching the game together, and it was even more notable in the rewatch that it's like, if the D-line does not stop a running back, you're done. Like that was basically the whole night, is it's on the D-line or they're picking up 15 yards.
That's the larger point to me. It's like, I almost want to be like, it's not his fault. Like, it's the fault of, I don't know if it's UCF's fault, it's the fault of the transfer linebackers, because they really didn't hit on anyone. And you would think like he can't cover. I don't think. He has not covered very well at all. He's struggling in tackling. It's in a position where it's like, yeah, he's clearly struggling out there, but they don't have anyone they can even throw out on the field just to give him a break and just say like, all right, we need, because he was out there, I think, the whole game. I can't remember.
So Cam Moore got out there a little bit. Ryan Davis got out there a little bit. Like they nothing. Like that room just doesn't have anything. And I think why it's so maddening is it just feels like this is every single year for UCF. They have one serviceable linebacker and that is it. And it just feels like it's that on repeat forever. And I think it's even more frustrating. And this is the downside of the portal for UCF as well as they've done with it is like Tatum Bethune's out there being awesome for FSU. Like Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste is out there for Ole Miss. Antonio Greer, who was committed to UCF when Tua was here, is over at Arkansas. It's like there are guys who should and could have been here that I think would have really elevated what the season could have been. But it's like, it took us 4 games to figure out what the liability is. That's the liability, is this D-line needs to be awesome. And it's not just on the linebackers. Secondaries also having issues. So it's just I guess the liability is just the defense is where we're at this point.
The entire back end of the defense outside of the front four, and even the front four. And we talked about it a little bit on Saturday. Like the front four has not rushed the passer very well at all. The front four has been good against the run.
I don't know. I was more impressed with them on the replay than I was in the moment. I think the D-line played fine. I think it's kind of an unreasonable request to ask them to be sacking the quarterback against the Big 12 runners up, or not the Big 12 runners up, the Big 12 champions, excuse me. Every play. I just don't think that's a reasonable ask.
No, it's not, but get to him like a couple times.
Yeah. I mean, but like,
a few times would be nice.
Honestly, you know who looked awesome was John Walker.
Yeah.
Looked freaking really awesome. Good. Looked a lot better than I would have expected him to look with. So that calmed me down a little bit because we still don't know what Ricky's status is. He missed the entire Villanova game and he went in for a little bit. I forget exactly. I made a note now. I can't find it. Hold on. I
think he started the game, right?
He did. But he played. I think it was either late in the first quarter, early. God, I made a note of it somewhere. Late in the first quarter, early in the second, he wasn't in anymore. So he went for a little bit, and so clearly whatever's up with him, made it so he couldn't keep playing. But I feel, as terrifying as that is, because Ricky's awesome, and that still is bad for depth wise, because John Walker was obviously playing anyway. Like I feel a little more okay. I don't feel like I have to freak out about that because of how good John Walker played.
I was like almost getting giddy with how well John Walker was playing.
It's crazy.
It was just like already he's making an impact, and we're 4 games into his true freshman season. Can I say one more John Walker thing really quickly? Yeah.
I need UCF Twitter to get out of their loser mentality because it's wearing on me. John Walker played really well and all of Twitter was, damn, he's going to transfer this offseason. What the hell is that? Like, what are we doing, guys? Like, and everyone's like, wow, some team's going to throw a bag at him. What the hell do you think was happening during his recruitment? He was a top 100 player. He had offers from everybody. Ohio State went hard after him. Florida went hard after him at the buzzer. This isn't some 3-star no one knew about who's shining at UCF like a Matt Lee or whoever that now teams are like, oh, we're intrigued. It's like everyone knew he was good and offered him that money already, and he still came to UCF.
I do want to say one more thing about the linebackers. And I think this is like something for the future, but something that like, and then not something that we'll even know or be able to keep an eye on now. But it's like you have to really, really hope that some of these young linebackers they've got in these last couple recruiting classes are going to pan out, because if they don't, like they need to, because there's nothing there right now. I'm not going to reasonably expect them to play as true freshmen and be great, but like next year, going into next year, I think Yates is probably gone. And then I'm pretty sure I don't
Jason
think he has any other. Jason Johnson definitely will be. So yeah, I mean, you're replacing your starters next year. And
well, now I'm scared. Who's starting at linebacker for UCF next year?
I don't want to worry about it now.
Is Andrew Harris going to go from a red-shirted true freshman to a starter at linebacker? Andrew Harris was also viewed as a project when he came in. So I don't want anyone to freak out about the idea of why aren't we trying out young guys there? But Cam Moore,
Troy Ford, maybe.
Troy Ford, yeah, I don't know. Transfers, I think that's the
messy thing. They're going to have to keep going transfers, but they didn't hit on any of them this year. So
that's what I was going to say. Is like it's after a couple of really strong transfer classes. It's just been wild for this one. They just didn't hit on almost anybody. I mean, the O-line, I guess, just because they're playing at least. But
playing.
We've barely seen DeCorian Patterson. I thought DeCorian Patterson was going to destroy teams. Like I thought it was going to be a lockdown corner, and it's like he's not even out there.
He was a day one starter.
He's tweeting stuff about like control what you can control and all that. Like that's where we're at with DeCorian Patterson. It's great. Never saw Fred Davis at linebackers. Obviously, were all misses. It's like they just missed on everyone, and I don't know. I mean, I've read a lot about the Athletic in particular. Well, we've seen a little bit of Sean Peterson, but not nearly, but not nearly as much
anything impactful.
Yeah, not nearly as much as I was anticipating. God, wide receivers. They brought in like 6 wide receivers to sit on the bench. And I think it's just the portal is tough, and I've read a lot about this. Teams talk about that basically. You see the news that player has entered portal. you need to offer them on the first day or you are not going to get them, which means that you literally have like hours to try to watch tape on this player and then decide if you can offer them or not. So it's just recruiting where you spend 2 years deciding if you want a guy at high school is already a crapshoot. So imagine when you have 2 hours. I mean, it's tough, but it's just wild that you expect a mixed bag. Some work out, some don't. They just missed on everybody. They just missed on the whole transfer class.
Yeah, and then sometimes you actually land a guy like Antonio Greer, who you think is going to be a starter for you, and then your coach leaves and he follows them and then doesn't get to play for him. So not getting on the field. It's just it's tough. A couple more things from Kansas State. The injuries, we talked a little about Ricky Barber, but Alec Holler didn't play. Obviously, John Rice Plumlee was missing, and it was something that Gus said on Monday was 3 of their 6 captains weren't playing, and they had a couple more guys get banged up during the game. To Jordan Mask, and I think Corey Thornton did too. Yep.
Right as we start to like Corey Thornton, he gets hurt. Crazy. Yeah,
it's been tough for him so far. I don't know. It's just, and you never know. And Bula Schmidt's still been banged up too. And that's part of what we can talk about next is the shuffling of the offensive line. I think some of it has been made necessary by Bula's injury, whatever that is. But it's also like Gus seemed pretty frustrated with the fact that they still are just shuffling guys and don't have a set starting 5.
Which, because he said that in the presser on Monday, he said that he's really frustrated that they've had to continue to move around O-linemen and that, and he's never had to do that in his career. And he hopes that they'll settle on a group soon. And part of me is like, yeah, that is frustrating. Another part's me like, you're the head coach. Like you get to decide if they continue shuffling or not. And I think we talked about this at one point in the offseason, that this is the scary downside of when you talk about how deep your room is and how you like 10 different guys, is that it's hard to figure out which guys you like where. And they're in a bad spot now where we're a third of the way through the season. And I get Bula was an injury, but at several other spots on the O-line, they're still tinkering and trying out different combinations of guys. And it's like an O-line needs time to gel. That's not a group where it's like whoever, where you just put out the 5 best, which is what Gus kept saying, and it works out in a game. I mean, they need to just pick a group and roll with it for better or worse.
This is why I was worried too when they were saying when Herb Hand was saying that all offseason, like, oh, this is the deepest group we've ever had. Like, oh, all these guys are probably going to end up playing. Like, it doesn't work like that at the offensive line position. Like you can rotate on the defensive line, you can rotate, on the outside edge rushers, stuff like that. But like you just can't rotate offensive linemen the way they are and expect it to be a cohesive group. I mean, some of the times it's been like some of the same guys, but at different positions. And it's just, you can't build any chemistry. You can't build any continuity that way. And I don't know, like now I'm wondering too, you're kind of getting to the point where it's like, all right, the offensive line that started against Kansas State, I didn't think they did particularly well, but do I want to see them start against Baylor just so that we have the same group for 2 straight weeks?
I'm fine with it. I'm totally fine with it. I mean, honestly, it's just,
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think who was it? It was Drake. Not wasn't Drake Metcalf, actually. It was Caden Kittler at center.
Yep.
Who was it that came in left? It was Marcellus Marshall came in at guard, I believe. Lokahi's, I think, been the only one to not move
stayed
around.
Still.
And then Tylen Grable as well, I think.
Yep.
And then Amari Kite came in.
So I don't know. Like you said, I think I literally might be in the boat of like, it's not even like the O-line had their best night, but it's just let them stick with it and see what you have. Because my God, if we come out there and they're like, we're back, that's like, we want to see how Drake Metcalf does at tackle. He's just really talented and we like the way that he plays. So let's put him out there and see what happens. There's obviously that would never happen, but you know what I mean? It's just ridiculous stuff.
I worry that it's just going to be a thing all season. I think they're 4 games in. They haven't found it. I don't know how they do find it from here.
Hopefully I thought Caden Kittler was okay. And I'm almost pro sticking with him because he's so young that I'm like, I would love if UCF could have the same center for the next 4 years. Because I just think that would pay off down the road so well. I'm willing to roll with him over Metcalf, even if Metcalf might be better. But I don't know what's going to happen. I will say that I think I even sent it to you when I was rewatching the game. I think the worst play of the whole game is Grable gets just destroyed on this one play. Like it literally gets knocked back into Timmy. And the wildest part is the guy who's doing it to him, he's using one arm. With one arm just shoves him back. I mean, it was crazy. So yeah, I mean, I think we just have to live with, they probably don't have any kind of combination of O-line that is elite. I think that much is clear at this point, but I'll settle for consistent. Let's just work on consistent in O-line versus mixing and matching. And by game 11, you're like, well, okay, well, this combo actually works. All right, we'll stick with this for the final 2 games of the season.
I'm with you. We can move in now to the Baylor preview. UCF and Baylor on Saturday at the Bounce House at 3:30. UCF getting the host a Big 12 game for the first time, and I think like as big of an event or as big of a moment as it was on Saturday for them to have their first Big 12 game, this like feels like the real introduction almost because it's just the way like it's going to be a huge celebration and it's going to be a crazy atmosphere.
It's going to be different, like you said. I mean, obviously that was the Kansas State game will always be historic because it was UCF's first ever Big 12 game. But this is like, this is where UCF gets to showcase it more than participating in, like I can't wait to see what the crowd's going to be like. It seems like and I'm excited because during the offseason, there were a couple times because I feel like we've had K-State penciled in as a loss since like the schedule came out. And there have been times where I've worried a little bit, like if UCF goes out against K-State and doesn't win obviously the Baylor game will be huge no matter what, but does some of that energy go down a little bit if they're not undefeated or whatever? That hasn't happened at all. I mean, the fan base and shouldn't. That would have been ridiculous if it did, but it's still something you worry about. I mean, it still feels kind of surreal. Like I'm just in my head. I'm like, on Saturday, I'm going to go to the bounce house where UCF is hosting Baylor in a Big 12 conference game. I mean, the Fiesta Bowl win is 10 years ago. It's only been 10 years. And it's just the rise to this point has been exciting. And it's where UCF's going to get to show off. And they'll, it's obviously on Fox Sports 1 because, why wouldn't it freaking be? And that's going to be annoying, but it's still just going to be this moment that I feel like we're all going to talk about for a very long time is, were you at the UCF's first Big 12 game? Were you there for the Baylor game?
It's like, it's the small things too. Like I know sometimes throughout the summer they were putting up like the digital banner of like all the Big 12 logos, but it's just walking in and seeing like the scoreboard having a UCF logo and a Baylor logo. Like we're used to seeing like a Temple logo or just like we always trash Temple, but like I don't know, even like ECU, like we're just used to seeing like the same logos, and we're actually going in and now seeing a Big 12 team, a team that UCF played in a New Year's Six bowl game, or BCS bowl game at the time, 10 years ago. And they're I believe, I haven't really promoted it a lot now, but I believe months ago, didn't Terry say that they're inviting back the 2013 team or members of it?
Yeah, I don't know if there's an official thing happening still or not. They haven't said anything, but I think the expectation is a lot of those guys are going to be there, which is exciting because that's like the team of,
Yeah, like I would imagine Bortles will be there. Like that'll be cool. That'll be cool.
He can take a break from building his house or whatever that tweet was. He can come check out the UCF game. But
no, it's going to be exciting. I'm really looking forward to that. That's the thing is it's especially with the game they played. I didn't ever really think that the hype was going to die down if they lost to Kansas State, but especially with the game they played, like they proved, I think, that they belong. There were some things that they have to clean up, and a lot of stuff was self-inflicted. I think Gus was actually kind of alluding to that, saying like some of it for the defense even was just like alignment things that they were out of position, and they can fix some of those things. So I think everybody's going to be going crazy.
Yeah, it's why I've been a little, not frustrated, like, because it hasn't been most fans, but some fans on social media have just been like, I think a little ridiculous with, because I said on our post-game pod, and I've posted a few times, as a lot of people have, that, my nightmare was UCF goes out and they can't compete, and we realized they had 2 years to build a Power 5 roster and they didn't do it. And they're not going to be able to be competitive in this conference. They're going to only win a couple games here and there. It's like UCF clearly built a Power 5 roster. They went on the road to the defending champion and had the lead in the third quarter and lost the lead due to self-inflicted mistakes, due to not going for it on a 4th and 2, then stopping Kansas State where you would get the ball and the lead, but committing a bad penalty to let them continue their drive, and then having your quarterback moonwalk for a negative 12 yards. So like that's why they lost. And it's not anything talent-wise, but and then I've seen some fans on social media who are like, we're done with the moral victories. Like, I don't want to hear that attitude. And it's just like, that's not what this is. It's like, at some point you just have to give way to reality. It's like, if you're one of the fans who thought UCF was going to come in and be 11-1, like, I'm sorry, but you're just not very smart. Like, that just wasn't, there was no evidence that was going to be the case. And I don't think you really need to bring down everyone else with your lunacy.
It doesn't feel like a moral victory thing. It feels like reality. It's like, this is where UCF is. They now have a gauge of where they are in the scope of this entire conference, I think. And I think they probably will have built a lot of confidence from that game. And I think we went through the schedule on Saturday, and I picked a scary amount of games that I thought they could win, because a lot of the games that remain on the schedule are winnable games, either because I think UCF is talent-wise on par or better than that team, or because some of these teams are just off to awful starts, and by the time UCF plays them, they could just be completely, checked out. But
now I will say, I swear to God, I'm going to let you do the key stats, because I know I'm just prolonging the hell out of the podcast at this point. But I will say that it's our podcast. We can just go for 6 hours.
You don't have to apologize to me. It's not my podcast.
I will say that everything we just said, UCF really needs to beat Baylor. Like, I think they will, but next up is at Kansas, who is a top 25 team right now. It says a lot about college football that Kansas made it in the top 25, and it wasn't even newsworthy. It was just like, they've been playing really well.
Yeah.
And then at Oklahoma after a bye week. So if UCF drops Baylor somehow, you're suddenly very easily looking at 3-4. And that's when we can panic and go, oh my God. So you really want to win this game, because if you do, then worst case scenario, you're going into Oklahoma with a 4-2 record, which is totally fine. So yeah, they do need to win on Saturday, to be clear, but I think they are more than capable of doing so.
It's also what we kind of talked about, and I'm going to keep delaying prolonging this and delaying the key stats, but it's also what we talked about with the Boise State game and why that game was so key, because it was like you get into conference play at 3-0 and you just have to win 3 conference games. If you win this game, which is a winnable game at home, you're already at 4 wins, 4-1, and you feel really good about your chances at least to winning at least 2 games the rest of the season to make a bowl in your first year in the Big 12. So
it's funny how
it's a big one.
It's funny how we're never going to get to the key stats. It's funny how we should just cut one. Which one do we like the least? It's funny how like one game swings mean so much, because like right now UCF is 3-1, which still feels like a really solid record and on the precipice of a good season. If they lost to Boise 2-2, it was just like, they suck this year. Like it's just funny how like a made field goal changes so much about how you feel about a season. But yeah, they're in a good spot. They just got to win this bit. 4-1. Like I said, even if they drop Kansas, going into Oklahoma at 4-2, 4-2 is a solid record, especially in the Power 5, where there will be interest and it doesn't look like UCF's just going to get smacked down. So I'm very excited pending them winning this Baylor game.
And the flip side of that is if they beat Baylor and then they go on the road and beat Kansas and they are 5-1, they're ranked going into that Oklahoma game.
College game day.
They've got to be ranked.
The Dylan Gabriel Bowl.
Crazy. Oh boy. Let's jump into key stats before we run out of time. You can't really run out of time. I guess it's kind of physically impossible, but
we work really hard to keep it to an hour, and this might just be one of those episodes where it doesn't happen, but we're fine.
Yeah. Some of these won't be too long. I think number 2 won't be too long. We'll start number 1. We'll start with number 1 of the 3 stats. Of course, we'll start number 1. Baylor has lost 7 straight games to FBS opponents. I've broken Christian.
I'm sorry. That was just really funny.
Baylor has lost 7 games in a row to FBS opponents. And I don't really know why. Like, I think Dave Aranda's a really good coach, but I'm like, he might get fired soon.
So did Gus. Gus in his press, they were like, what do you know about Dave Aranda? Or they just asked, they're like, what do you know about Baylor? And he was like, I know that Dave Aranda is an excellent football coach. Like, was just really, which, they were both in the SEC at the same time. So a lot of mutual respect. But that man is so going to get fired. And that sucks, because I like Dave Aranda a lot. He seems like a really insightful, interesting guy. But what's weird about Baylor is that you actually take a step back. And at this point, this is year 4 for him. And all but one season's been pretty terrible. They won the Big 12 in 2021. They won the conference. Then they went to and won the Sugar Bowl. And outside of that one season, they've just been bad under him. It's very weird.
It is weird, because I do, again, I think he's a weird I think he's a weird coach. I think he's a really good coach. It's funny, I haven't watched his press conference this week, but I remember from Big 12 Media Days, he was every question he would say, thank you for that question, and then he'd answer the question. Apparently he does that even like during the season. Like, because Matt, our former roommate, one of my friends and our friend Matt, texted me and was like, said he watched Aranda's press conference, and he seemed like just like the nicest guy. He was like, every question he was still saying, thank you for that question, and then you'd answer it.
What if it's a really mean question? Does he still say it?
I don't know. I think like he probably still like, I appreciate the question, but this, like, I don't know. It's just, it seems
like if someone was like, Dave, do you feel like you're on the hot seat? Would he say, thank you for bringing up my job stability? I don't know. I'd probably drop it at that point.
Don't tell Matt Campbell he's on the hot seat. We didn't talk about that last week, but I tried to like go after a fan.
Yeah, if you don't know what we're talking about, Matt Campbell, who is Iowa State's head coach. I don't know where that was. They were leaving the Ohio game, and it was like an outdoor walkway where fans could walk along the line. And an Iowa State fan, I'm going to put in quotes, heckles him, because the heckle was he walks by and he goes, "You're on the hot seat, Matt." And Campbell turns around and just literally tries to go back and fight him, and his players have to like hold him back. And it's like, that's what got you? Like, really?
Yeah. It was interesting. But yeah, 7 straight FBS losses for Baylor. And then this season,
their last win was at Oklahoma, which I find kind of funny.
Yeah. And this season has been not so good for them. They've I think in their one win, they've struggled a little bit. I mean, they ended up winning by 23, but they struggled with Long Island.
Yeah. Which is a real school.
Ideal.
We checked.
Yeah, we did check. But they lost to Texas State to start things out. They lost to Utah, which is a good team. They lost to Texas. So they've had a tough, well, I don't say they had a tough schedule. They've had 2 of their 4 games have been tough opponents, ranked opponents, but they haven't looked like they've put up much of a fight.
So that is that's the caveat I wanted to throw in here, because I know a lot of UCF fans are just in the mode of like, yeah, Baylor sucks and we're going to win by 30 or something like that. Like, I don't think Baylor's as bad as people think they are. I think they're pretty bad and probably one of the worst teams in the Big 12, but the Texas State loss was crazy. But Texas State's 3-1 right now and might be one of the better group of 5 teams. They almost won against Utah. That game came down to the final drive, and Utah's a very good team, and Texas is also a very good team. So we actually haven't really, outside of Texas State, which I assume is worse than UCF. I think that's pretty fair to say. We haven't seen a ton of Baylor against more mid-level competition, mid to high level where UCF is at. So I don't think that we can just pencil in blowout win. I think that Baylor still has a lot of talent. It's still probably going to be competitive. I mean, you have to take the strength of the schedule into account, but I also just think they're kind of in shambles right now as a program, and they clearly have a lot of issues. And I think there are issues that UCF could expose. I also think that it's a freaking home game for UCF and it's a road game for Baylor. And that is going to be one of the better environments the Bounce House has ever had. And that's tough. So
yeah, and that's where I've kind of fell in this one. I still don't think Baylor's like I don't think they're awful or anything. I think we'll get to our score predictions, but I think UCF wins the game. I think a large part of that is just this is going to be an environment that's going to be very advantageous for UCF. So, and then this is the other thing is that Saturday is key stat number 2. That Saturday will be Baylor's first road game of the season.
Which that's kind of wild to me that they opened with 4. Imagine opening with 4 home games and going 1-3. That's a tough break.
Yeah, that really isn't ideal, I wouldn't say. And they've had, we should mention that they've been playing with their backup quarterback as UCF has been the last couple of weeks. Sawyer Robertson, who has put up one of the worst stat lines I think I've seen over the course of a few games. I mean, he's completed under 50% of his passes, 49.5, has a 6.7 yard average, 1 touchdown, 4 picks. He's been sacked 6 times. But I think there's a chance, at least a shot, that Blake Shapen comes back this week.
They upgraded him to day-to-day yesterday. And there are also some other guys they've had out with injuries who they think they're going to hopefully get back or have a chance of getting back. So
Gus didn't seem to really have he didn't seem to carry the risks. He was like, yeah, last week they did that with the whole quarterback thing, and then he showed up and he moved pretty well. And I'm with you, Gus. I think that was a fake injury, and I think Will Howard was fine all along. Just a little bit of gamesmanship. So
I think that's
coaches lie. Gus does it too.
That's the most conspiracy thing I think I've ever dropped on this podcast. Is I'm just not convinced that Will Howard was injured this week. He limped out of the tunnel and then played exactly maybe he's just a warrior, but he looked fine. But I think the reason that there isn't a ton of fear, it's not like Shapen is some all-star quarterback. He's fine. So it's even if he does come back, I don't think that means, UCF's in trouble. It's just they'll have a slightly better quarterback than they do now.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at their offense, I don't none of these guys, and I'm sure someone will break out and be an absolute menace like Boise State. I forget the Boise State guy's name, but then UCF has dealt with a couple players this year that have just almost single-handedly beaten them. One of them did. But they're their running backs, none of them have really done anything overly impressive. They kind of a committee. Receiver-wise, there's no one with any gaudy numbers or anything. So it's this hasn't been a great offense with or without the backup, or with or without the starting quarterback. And yeah, this will be the first road environment they play in all year. So
can I say one more thing about it being a road game for Baylor and a home game for UCF?
Yes.
I think that UCF fans have invented a whiteout for this game.
Oh, yeah.
I'm very weirded out by this whole thing.
Yes and no.
No, I think they have. Because I've been noticing this since the Kansas State game ended, that there's all these posts on social media about UCF's doing a whiteout game for Baylor and oh my God, fans, get your white shirts. I saw someone tweeted that they bet they're going to lay out white shirts on the seats, which I don't believe is a thing UCF's ever done. And just all these tweets about it's a whiteout. I even saw a couple, literally 2 different Penn State fans complaining about how UCF's copying their whiteout. I've seen Baylor fans saying, ooh, UCF's doing a whiteout for us. The UCF fans wear was just white. UCF hasn't said anything about that's not the same thing to me. UCF isn't billing this as a whiteout. It's just that they usually pick one game each year when they cycle through the UCF fans wear, and it's just white. I don't think there's any kind of special thing.
Stanford in 2019, and most people wore white.
Tulane last year, they usually just pick a game that they think is probably going to be a day game and say, hey, you should wear white so you don't get hot. And somehow on social media, it's morphed into UCF's doing a whiteout, and Penn State fans are mad that UCF's ripped off their whiteout. Has UCF even tweeted anything about the fans wear, or are people just going off the graphic they dropped?
I don't know if they have this week. I'm really not sure. But
it's very odd. And like I said, it's I get that some people might be saying that you're what do you mean? It's UCF fans wear white, so it's a whiteout. I'm I do get that. They're telling fans to wear white, but billing a game as it's a whiteout and we're gonna lay out white jerseys and it's a big thing versus the UCF fans wear just cycling through the same 4 things they always do each season, and this is the white one is not the same thing to me. I don't know. I just have found that odd.
Yeah, I don't think it has any extra significance if that's what people are trying to insinuate. It just happens to be this one.
They're just finally taking our advice. How many years have we said that it just needs to be white for day games, black for night games, and that's it?
I don't know, but I'll continue to say it until that's a thing.
Maybe they never did it because they knew this would happen, was that if they said UCF fans were white, people would be like, it's a whiteout. They're going to lay out shirts on the seats and Baylor's going to be shaking. And I don't know. Because it even like Baylor announced this is how it even got weirder, because UCF fans also gaslit themselves into thinking UCF was going to wear a whiteout uniform for a home game. Even despite my best efforts of like years now explaining to fans that UCF doesn't get to do that without getting permission from the road team, which is why it very rarely happens. And even still, and then Baylor announced that they were wearing white uniforms yesterday, and Twitter was like, what? Like, how is this happening?
I saw someone say something like, are we still supposed to wear white?
Yeah,
is UCF going to change the graphic? It doesn't. It's one of those. It's we moved on from Zombie Nation Gate to this.
We literally have. We went straight from why isn't UCF playing Zombie Nation enough to inventing a whiteout game. Like I've been fascinated by this. I'm really interested.
Yeah. Back to some of the on-field stuff.
Can I say something else really quickly?
Oh gosh, yes.
So I'm just gonna keep going. Last year, the UCF fans were for SMU was white. Do you remember anything about that game being like, we got to wear a whiteout? No, but also
it was that was the game that got moved to Wednesday, like the following Wednesday. So.
But even before the hurricane, I don't remember anyone being like, we got like, I don't know. I'm very confused by all this.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Key stat number 3. Baylor has the 104th ranked run defense in the country. They're allowing 171 yards per game on the ground. And I don't know. I don't have the number in front of me. I don't think UCF ran it quite as well as they did in the first 3 games last week. I still think they ran it pretty well. Johnny Richardson had led the way, but I still think UCF's strength is their run game, and they can probably wear down Baylor in the heat in this game. Not that it's not hot in Texas. I don't know why I said that. That was stupid.
It's not humid.
It's hot in Texas. No, it's not humid.
Different kind of heat.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think hopefully RJ is at full strength. I know he's been a little banged up, kind of intermittently here, but they have the running backs to do it. And I think last week it was. And I think the reason I felt like they didn't run the ball well, which I think they probably ran it fine. I think the reason I thought that is because every big play that UCF had, I'm pretty sure, was a deep ball from Timmy.
So UCF against Kansas State, 143 total rushing yards. Johnny led the way with 76 yards on 6 carries. Yeah.
On 6 carries.
They were going up against what Kansas came in that game. What, the number 3 run defense in the country. So I think it's pretty clear that's you, and UCF ran the ball pretty well. So I think it's pretty clear that that's their strength. And that to me is the stat for Baylor. I'm like, okay, I think UCF wins, because I think that it is as simple as that. Caveat I will throw in on that is that the thing about Timmy McClain, crazy, we're like this deep in, and I don't know if we've mentioned him outside of like a passing comment, is I don't know what we're doing, guys. Most of you just want to hear about the quarterback anyway. I'm so sorry. We probably lost all you anyway. Is I know that you never really know what you have with a backup quarterback or any new quarterback until you get him out there in a big game. They clearly were very conservative with Timmy early on, and he made some dumb mistakes. The 12-yard thing was bad. He had many good moments too. What I saw from Kansas State, both on the initial watch and the rewatch, was I am ready for them to just unleash Timmy's deep ball. Like, just let him take shots all the freaking time. Because it's beautiful and it works. And if you can marry, let's just go to the Josh Heupel days, right? If you can marry the really strong run game they have with taking those deep shots and forcing the defense to account for that, which Timmy can do a lot better than Mikey or JRP from the last few years, then go for it. I mean, he threw some beautiful balls.
That's what I was going to say, is that if they can run the ball against Baylor the way they did the first 3 games, I know it was lesser defenses, but even the way they did last week, it's like that opens up and helps Timmy so much. And I know something that Gus mentioned Monday was that they need to be like really good around him. They need to be better around him, because he said, Timmy had some moments, but he thought he did some really good things, and that they let him down a couple of times. So, I mean, I think Timmy has honestly, I don't know, is it the right word, acclimated himself really well to everything the first 2 weeks, and now he comes back home. It's going to be a great atmosphere, and I think he really does. He obviously has that potential for big plays down the field, but if they run the ball against the suspect run defense as well as they know they can, I think offensively they're gonna have a pretty big day.
If you're Baylor's defense and you're having to guess on a given play of whether RJ Harvey's about to gash you for 10 yards or if Timmy's going to chuck one to Kobe downfield, like, UCF wins. Like, that's that. And I think the situation with how conservative they played with Timmy is basically the point I was getting at, was that he can throw a really good deep ball in practice, and sometimes stuff just doesn't translate to games. I think the most famous version of that is Mackenzie Milton sucked in practice. That was like a much known thing, and it's part of the reason that 2017 kind of came out of nowhere. And he was named the starter pretty late into that offseason, because it was like, then he gets in the game and turns it on. So now I'm hoping that the coaching staff has seen in a game that Timmy can execute those throws. Keep them coming. I mean, honestly, him and Kobe seem to have a connection. I'm sure Javon would love it because he just seems mad after every game about something. So I really think that that's something that they need to further implement into this offense.
Yeah, I think so. So we can jump in then, I guess, to how we think UCF can win this game, and I think it's just that it's doing that very well. And I think obviously on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, if the offense is doing that, they're going to be putting the defense in good situations. Like if they give the defense a lead to protect and allow them to do their thing, that will be good itself. And they just kind of tackle better on defense. I mean, I know there's a lot of things we could still say about the linebackers. Like they need to cover better, they need to do all that. The secondary needs to be better, but they just mostly need to tackle better. They can't be letting guys get through the line, and every time they get through the line, it's 10, 12 yards, because then you're going to stay on the field forever, and you're going to be gassed by halftime. So if they could do that on defense and play that way on offense that we were just talking about, I think it's one of those where it doesn't have to be a down to the wire win.
This is courtesy of CJ Vogel on Twitter. UCF has 37 missed tackles on the season, which is 9-ish a game.
Yeah. It's not the worst in the conference, as that graphic says, but it's not good.
It's actually one of the better ones in the conference, which is funny. But I agree with everything you just said. I just had that Baylor can't stop the run and UCF puts up points. Darren Hinshaw is so full of just awesome sayings I like. And one thing that about on the topic of putting up points that he said in his Sunday Access, which I was not at, but the video and stuff got posted, was that he likes I lost it. What was it that he said?
Oh, no.
Oh, I remember. Okay. He was talking about Timmy and how his biggest issue of Timmy from the game was situations where they're in field goal range and Timmy's trying to force a first down. And he said he told Timmy that every drive needs to end in a kick. And he doesn't care whether it's a field goal or a PAT, but it needs to end in a kick. So, and he told Timmy that he needs to remember that when it's 3rd and 6 and he ends up taking a sack, it's like, no, it just needs to end in a kick. Like, we don't care which one. Yeah. So don't do that. And I'm like, that is a really good saying. Like, I like looking at it that way.
It's a good saying, but I also don't know if I agree.
I agree with the situation they're in, especially in a Power 5
in the
conference.
situation they're like, but I would much like, it's like, I don't care which one. I definitely care which one. I would much prefer it to be the PAT and not the field goal. But if you're in a situation, I get what he's saying in a third down situation like that. Yeah, you want to be able to kick the field goal, but
I think especially because we saw it several times. I mean, sure, Bailey. I'm not sitting here and being like, yeah, Darren Hinshaw announced that he likes field goals more than touchdowns, but it's just they had situations in that game multiple times.
That's where the saying just like kind of loses its weight to me, where it's just like, I think you should care.
The saying has a lot of weight when you have a quarterback who sees a 3rd and 6 and instinct is to, instead of throwing the ball away when the play is not there, lose 12 yards. So like, I think
he won't do that again. Surely.
I'm sure he won't do it again, but he did it once. and hopefully part of the reason he won't do it again, because somewhere in his head, he's going to hear, we're fine with kicks. So we'll be good with that. So we do not need to be the talent is too evenly distributed in this league to be forcing stuff on 3rd downs. It's a different ball game than it was in the AAC. So
how do you think UCF can lose this game?
Walter Yates. No. I just put that. No, I'm kidding. That wasn't my answer. I just have that the defensive issues continue and Baylor is able to turn the game into a shootout. I don't know. I worry a lot about how, if that's how UCF's going to lose games this year, is a situation like Kansas State where you're going to need to put up 40 plus points to win. That's a way bigger ask in this league than it was in the last one. And that's how I fear they lose, is if defense just can't contain them.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think that's kind of how you get to the point where I have my scenario where they lose, is like, if it's a game that's kind of tight throughout, and then we see a similar thing down the stretch where UCF starts turning the ball over and then having stupid penalties and like just basically imploding like they did last week, that's obviously a very bad recipe to lose, and it's a recipe for losing the game. And if there's a situation, it's always kind of hard to gauge, and there's certain ways you can see it and you can't. But if they're outcoached in this game, especially in late game situations, like that 4th and 2 is going to be burned in my head, but I think maybe forever, where he didn't go for it, and then you see what happened after that. And I'm not saying like he's a bad coach for that, but there's just been things that have bothered me throughout the last probably couple of years, where it's like, I love this staff and I love their ability to recruit, but sometimes on game days I'm like, are you out there? Like, are you doing anything? I will say a couple points on the 4th and 2. I do agree. I fully agree. But we're acting like if they'd gone for the 4th and 2, they win the game. It's like they could have been stuck on the 4 and 2. They could have gotten it, then gone 3 and out a couple plays later. Like it's not like Gus was sitting there at the goal line, was like, we need a touchdown to win, and I'm gonna kick it. Like it was a decision. It was a decision I didn't agree with, but I honestly think that
the Draymond penalty was way more impactful for the flow of the game and the what's the word I'm looking for? Not the energy. What's the momentum? Momentum is what I'm looking for. I think that's what gave Kansas State the momentum, not punting on a 4th and 2 or kicking or however they ended that.
Yeah, but it all led to that. That's where it started.
Well, actually, it was all when UCF started a program in 1979. That's what all led to it. Like we can play 6 degrees of separation all day. I'm just saying that when you actually talk about the momentum shift, it was the penalty. It wasn't not going for it on 4th and 2.
Agree to disagree.
Okay.
All right. Score predictions. Who do you got?
I to this day still like to look up the score predictions for the UCF Baylor 2013 game, and I don't want to become that, so I'm saying UCF 35-27.
35-27. I have UCF 37-24.
You want to be those. Okay. I could be way off base. I just don't see UCF winning by multiple scores. I could be totally wrong. Well, not multiple scores, multiple touchdowns, I'll say. Like I could see like a 10-point win, but I don't know. Is this team at a point where they can blow out a Power 5 team?
Would you consider that a blowout?
Yes.
We talked about this like earlier, like weeks ago.
I understand that it's only a couple score. What did you say, 37-24?
Yeah.
13. I understand that's only 2 touchdowns, but I also think that how those 2 touchdowns are distributed matters. 37-24 looks dominant to me, whereas like 13-0 doesn't, you know?
Yeah, I guess
yeah.
so. It just feels like, I don't know, it feels like a game where UCF's going to be able to do enough offensively. I'm worried that I'm not giving Baylor enough points. Their offense has been really bad so far, but also UCF's defense last week looked not encouraging at all.
We tend to do this just as human beings, is that like one game happens and we color everything through that. Like the defense played badly, so they now have a bad defense. Like defense might be fine. I mean, they're playing a much worse team than they were last week.
And that's the thing. I had a really hard time with this because like Baylor gave up only 38 points to Texas. So I was like, I feel like I'm giving UCF too much with 37. Then like they also only scored 6 against Texas. So I feel like
I was going to say like the
18-point jump. Like an 18-point jump to 24. It's just, I don't know. I had a really hard time coming up with an actual real feel for this game, but I think UCF wins is kind of how I am. And I don't know. I guess it could be a closer one, but
I think my other thing with Texas only in quotes scoring 38 is like, did they need to score more than that? Like, I mean, they were up 28-3 at one point. Like they probably just didn't. I mean, they only scored.
Yeah, I mean,
they went to
halftime.
They went to halftime up 28-6, and they only scored twice in the second half. That to me just looks like they were in firm control. They didn't need to be going crazy, you know?
Yeah. And if you want to read about how that game went down, stay tuned to Night Sports Now.
That's right.
Around the Big 12, week 4 coming out.
Around
soon.
the Big 12 will be up tomorrow morning. I really need to write something. Like I was gaining on you, and the Bailey and I've had it's not even a competition because you've been crushing me. Like going back to when we started Night Sports Now in 2017, and you're like a gazillion articles ahead of me. I haven't written anything in a while. I'm gonna write something this week.
And I think the funny thing is like I've never really been like, haha, I have more articles than you. It's just been a thing that you've been like constantly like, I need to catch up to you.
It bothers me. It bothers me, and I don't even think you notice it. But like every time you post an article, I'm like one more behind. Like, but what makes it crazy is that you quit for like 3 years, and I still didn't catch up in that span. Like you were gone for literally like 3 seasons, and I was writing a lot then, and just did not get close.
I don't even remember. Like I don't know how I did that much in college. We won't have to get into it, but I don't remember how like.
You would literally like text me because you were really prolific before we lived together. It was that first season, 2017. And it would be like, you would text me on a Monday and be like, I have an idea for a story. And I'd be like, cool. And you'd be like, all right, I'm going to write it. And then you send it to me 2 hours later. And then like the next day, you'd be like, I have this idea. And you would just come up with all these like,
I'm going to go back to my profile. I don't remember like what I really did. I remember doing the weekly, like around the AAC, but I don't remember like anything. I'm like trying to think of how I got that.
Part of it was also
part of it. I covered other sports.
I was going to say, so a big part of it was when we founded Night Sports Now back in 2017, that it's so not what it is now, but the idea, because now it's basically a website for a podcast that we also post articles on. But at the time, the idea was that no one at the time, this is a different world than it is now. Very few people were covering the non-football sports at UCF. It wasn't like it was now where you got a ton of folks. And I and you and our friend Evan were like, we have a great idea. We're going to be, and that was even like our slogan, which are still our slogan, is all UCF sports all the time, which is so not what it's been for several years, but was that we're going to cover everything. We're going to go get a bunch of student journalists who are looking for clips, because that's a big thing. If you're a journalist in college, you need clips, and we're going to cover everything. We're going to cover softball, women's soccer, baseball, all of it. And we did that for a while at first. And that's where a lot of those clips came from, is we got credentialed for everything and we were at everything. And what we learned very quickly is no one wants to read about anything except football. And we would, I would have a student journalist turn me in a lovely game story off of the volleyball game, and then I would post it and watch it get 12 views. So it just that very quickly changed it. And then also we found it in summer of 17, and then that season football went undefeated, so it quickly became all right, we're just gonna write about football. But
yeah.
So that was where a lot of your stuff came from, I think. You're at 195 articles. You're 5 away from 200.
Wow, get there soon. All right, let's jump into the football news, and then we'll wrap things up here. Couple things from the NFL side of things. Josh Sitton and Brandon Marshall were among the 124 class of 2024 nominees for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I feel like I don't know if I have the right, like, I don't know if I have my finger on the pulse here, right, or not, but I feel like Brandon Marshall has been talked about as a potential Hall of Famer. He had a really good career. I don't know if he's going to be in the Hall of Fame, but he had a really good career.
He wasn't as good at UCF as people think he was. Okay, I said it. That's that's one of my biggest UCF hot takes. Just throwing it out there. He was very good.
We talked about that on the podcast before.
We probably
because we did the all-time draft thing.
He was very good at UCF, but he wasn't like his NFL career has sort of rewritten a little bit what he actually was here. I feel like I'm sorry,
because when people talk about all-time great UCF receivers, they like include him like near the top, and it's like I think there've been guys that have surpassed him.
There are a lot
in recent years.
take over him.
Yeah. Gabe Davis and Latavius Murray both scored touchdowns in the Bills' win over the Commanders on Sunday, and Matt Prater made a 62-yard field goal in the Cardinals' win over the Cowboys on Sunday. He's still doing it. I don't even know how old he is now, but he's still doing it and doing it well. Last thing, UCF and Kansas next week will kick off at 4:00 Eastern and be televised on Fox. So UCF has escaped FS1 for the first time outside of the Villanova game, which was on a ESPN Plus stream that I probably enjoyed better.
At long last.
Even though it had problems.
I have hated FS1 with all my heart, and I'm sure that more FS1 games are coming, but we should get a break because I don't buy that the Oklahoma game will be on FS1. So hopefully we'll get a few weeks of a break here from that. So that's exciting.
Yeah. And so we'll jump into game of the week. Actually, sorry, we have to get one more thing that I didn't write down here. John Rice Plumlee, I guess Gus is saying he's ahead of schedule. He's making really good progress. I meant to talk about this at the top, but I guess there's really nothing more than that, is that Gus is saying that they think they could get him back sooner than they originally thought if he continues to make the progress he's making right now. I don't know what that means, but
I don't know what it means either, because he said that he's ahead of schedule and then said he's still a few weeks away, which we talked about. We joked that a few weeks is a very malleable term that probably doesn't mean anything, but
yeah,
I don't know. I did see some UCF fans were overreacting like hell to that, and we're like, oh, so he's coming back for Kansas? No, he's not coming back for Kansas. I mean, I think that best case scenario still probably feels like Oklahoma, since you got the bye week in there, but it's still encouraging. Been a lot worse if he got up there and was like, yeah, it's going to be worse than we thought. So you take that news.
I don't see how they can see the bye week and be like, yeah, let's get him back before the bye week. Like, I don't know.
By the way,
he's fully ready, but yeah.
If you're wondering where all your Night Sports Now articles came from, in August of 2017, you wrote a game story on a women's soccer exhibition match. So that's how in the weeds we were.
Well, we were doing, I remember back then we were doing like briefs on everything. So
everything that happened, we were publishing stuff, and you were doing all
I remember now.
So I've solved the riddle of where all your articles came from.
Yeah.
Night Notes. I forgot about Night Notes. I'm just hijacking the podcast of just talking. You used to do a thing called Night Notes in 2017 where you do a little, like, it was like a little notebook each week on like stuff about UCF. Man, those are the
I gotta go back and reminisce and read some. I have so many things. I have so much to do after we get off this podcast, but I'm probably gonna spend like an hour just going through.
This has changed. I clicked on your Night Notes from October 27th, 2017, and the first point is linebackers leading the way. Not so much these days.
No.
But anyway, back to the actual podcast.
Speaking of women's soccer, game of the week, UCF women's soccer is 7-2-0. They're 3-0-0 in the Big 12. They're at Oklahoma State this Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Oklahoma State's 10-2, 10-2-0, 3-0-0 in the Big 12. So top of the table matchup in women's soccer at the Big 12. UCF just kind of picked up where they left off last year in the AAC. Like, they've just been who they beat first. I can't remember who they played the first game, but they beat Houston after that, and they beat Kansas most recently. So
yeah, UCF is a full-on soccer school right now, between them and men's soccer being number 3 in the country and number 2 in RPI. So football school, but spelled the other way.
Other way, yeah. Awesome. So tweet of the week.
Tweet of the week. If you heard a noise there, by the way, I dropped my phone. Apologies. Tweet of the week this week goes to Bold Disclosure, that USF account that I think we all know because they just like they're lunatics, but it's cool.
One of the worst accounts in existence.
They tweeted USF won on Saturday, if you did not know that, and they tweeted USF wins, UCF loses with the little like person sleeping in the bed with the USF hat. Like they're sleeping nice that UCF and USF lost. I want to bring this up for a couple of reasons. One, this is the same account that tweets rent free every time a UCF fan tweets about USF and says, "Why do you care about us?" I also want to point out, because I was like, wow, UCF lost and USF won on the same day. When was the last time that happened? Had to look it up. 2,500 days ago. It was the 2016 War on F4 when USF beat UCF. That was the most recent time that UCF lost on a day USF won. And if you're wondering how could that be the case, it's because USF doesn't really win anything. But they are back. They beat Rice. That is an AAU school. So
Christian, they're talking New Year's Six.
Okay, the other thing I have to say, are they actually talking New Year's Six or is that a joke?
I've seen a couple people. I mean, I think it was more so there was an article that mentioned them and USF fans like probably took it and ran with it.
Every time
they were surprised, I think, but they were like also like we could.
Every time I think UCF fans are crazy, I just dip my toe into USF Twitter and I remember what real insanity looks like. And the other thing I want to point out about USF is this where they're at now? Like Rice is their big. Oh, and the other thing on top of that is that I don't know if you saw any. For some reason, you and I watched some of that game on Saturday because we're just that committed to USF, and no one at the game. No one at the game. I don't mean like bad crowd. I mean, I have never, I don't think, seen a USF game that bad in attendance. There were photo zones where you should go look. Like, I mean, it literally looks empty. Like there are not human beings there. They announced 29,000. It's just, I love it so much. I love lying about attendance.
Yeah. Continuing to do that. And
you know how many people watched that game on TV?
7, maybe
53,000 people.
Not many.
No.
Not many. Yeah, I thought it was a crazy reality on Saturday where people saw USF fans clowning UCF, and I'm like, you realize like UCF just lost to the reigning Big 12 champion in an actual like real conference. Like I don't want to trash the AAC, but like the AAC now isn't even what it was last year.
You
so,
just
like,
said in a real conference.
Yeah, no, I can trash it now because all of the best teams in the league left.
That's okay.
The two of them.
Relax. I was going to say,
except
A,
for Tulane.
Houston's bad. B, Memphis and SMU were still there, but it's still hilarious. And I called that when we talked about USF
SMU's barely
last
there.
week. They are. They're on their way out to the Atlantic Coast Conference. I in tweeted a week last week, I said they were going to do that. I said when UCF loses to Kansas State and they beat Rice, they're going to be like, yeah, we're so back, and UCF sucks. They're sad little people, but it's fine.
It's very extremely predictable.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll get out of here now on that note. But we thank everyone for listening. Keep leaving us your 5-star reviews. We will be back Saturday evening with episode 164 post-game podcast after UCF and Baylor. But until then, you can find us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at @ByCA Simmons, and at Night Sports Now. Thanks so much for being with us, and we will talk to you Saturday.
Bye, everybody.